Okay, by the way, if you or your leaders are needing some help with some of the teaching helps for any of the honors, most honors have teaching helps to help you learn, to help your teachers prepare to help you learn at wiki.pathfindersonline.org. Tons of stuff there for the 600 honors. Just kind of a little bit of an advertisement. Yeah, you can see my family there. My son's a Pathfinder. He's starting his Ranger classwork this fall. And my wife is the Pathfinder director for the Potomac Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. So yeah, we actually got married in a Pathfinder ceremony. She wouldn't let me wear a Pathfinder uniform, but our pastors did, and over 40 of the people who attended wore their Pathfinder uniform. We marched out between Pathfinder flags. So that was kind of cool. My daughter is starting her 2nd grade, so she's in Sunbeam this fall in the Adventurer Club program. So we are club ministry people. Okay, here we go. Requirement 1. In simple terms, describe a temperate deciduous forest. Now, sometimes I'm going to refer to it as TDF, the abbreviation. It just saves a lot of space on the screens. Temperate deciduous forest. So here we go. There's a picture of one. A temperate deciduous forest is a forest composed of broad-leafed trees which lose their leaves in the winter. So you know the basic 2 types of trees, right? You've got your evergreens with the pokey leaves, and then you've got the broadleaf trees like oaks and maples and all those kinds. Here's kind of an interesting factoid. In the UK, most of the temperate deciduous forest that was all broadleaf trees, no pines present, no cedars present, no evergreens of any type present, is basically gone in the UK. As I Googled, they said that there might be there seemed to be evidence that there were a few small stands of pure temperate deciduous forest up there in Scotland with Pastor NJ. But these are largely gone because they were logged to make the ships for the conquest of the Americas back in the 16 and 1700s. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the UK needed us way back then, was because they needed our wood. So you now have an Atlantic mixed forest, which basically means you still have oaks and you still have maples, but it's intermixed with a whole bunch of evergreens. There's not a pure temperate deciduous forest in the UK or in much of Western Europe anymore. The only true large tract of TDF is over in Poland and Belarus in Eastern Europe. There's some very scattered across France, a few across Germany. Spain, as I was looking, seems to have one small stand, but most of the forests have become a mixed forest. There's evergreen in there. Here in the United States, something pretty similar has happened. Basically, there are 3 national forests that have protected areas that are still pure temperate deciduous forests. The rest have become the mixed forest, just like there in the UK and Western Europe. So that's the simple definition. You've got broadleaf trees in a forest. Simple definition. So now we need to go through and figure out what are the defining factors. When you're walking in the woods, how do you know whether you're in a temperate deciduous forest or, in our case, a mixed forest that contains temperate deciduous things? First of all, we will have distinct warm and cool seasons. Hot summers, spring and fall are not as warm. Usually there's different levels of moisture. I don't know, do you guys get snow there in the UK?
Yes, Mark, we get our fair share.
Oh, good. Here in Maryland, we get about 14 to 20 centimeters most years. Some years we are lucky enough to get an entire meter, but that doesn't happen very often. But temperate deciduous forests may not always get snow, but they have definitely 4 seasons. When you get down to Florida, which is in the southern part of the United States, you're no longer in temperate deciduous forest because they don't have winter. They really only have summer and shoulder seasons that are sort of like summer. That's more of a tropical or subtropical environment. So got to have 4 seasons. You also have to have, when you go walking in a temperate deciduous forest, you'll have 3 layers. You'll have the canopy, that's the big broadleaf trees way up high that pretty much block out the sun to the forest floor, at least mostly. Then you'll have an understory that's often composed of things like brambles, poison ivy here in the eastern United States. Hopefully you don't have poison ivy. And other shorter things, dogwood trees, bushes of different types, ferns, and then there'll always be a nice rich layer of dirt at the bottom. Why is it a nice rich layer of dirt? Because those broadleaf trees, the leaves fall off every autumn, and that leaf matter turns into organic matter, dirt. So you get nice dirt, a canopy way up top, and an understory in between. Canopy, understory, and humus. 3 layers. That's another characteristic. This is a little video that I'm going to have you, we're uploading this presentation because videos don't work very well. We're uploading these presentations and Mrs. Davidson or Pastor Dejan will send you guys the link and whatever of how you can access this so that you can watch these videos on your own. But basically, this one here shows what a tree looks like in the different season. You see summer with all the leaves on it. In the spring, it just barely has leaves, just little tiny green things. In the autumn, all the leaves turn the brilliant reds, yellows, and oranges like you see on my template background. Those are all autumn leaves. And then in the winter, no leaves. They're gone, and the snow blows in many areas. Oh, flowers. Flowers are a major part of a temperate deciduous forest, usually in the springtime. And here's a very simple reason why. Springtime, the leaves haven't come out yet up in the trees, so the sunlight is able to hit that rich dirt layer on the ground, and all those little seeds from last year's flowers can all, they've been drinking in and loving that really rich soil. They pop up, put out their flowers. These are pictures I took just this past spring. Jack in the pulpits, I don't think you're blessed enough to have them in your part of the world. They are a really pretty green flower we have around here. Trilliums and orchids is part of that part of the plant family. Flowering trees of different sorts and little tiny white, I think that's Star of Bethlehem there on the lower right hand side. But lots of flowers and colors, especially the lighter colors in the springtime, though every once in a while we'll get pinks and reds and blues like the violets. All kinds of different flowering species. Yeah, the funny thing is, and this is because the UK and the eastern United States both are part of temperate deciduous forest, many of the flowers, especially the flowers in trees, are pretty much the same whether you're on that side of the Atlantic Ocean or whether you're on my side of the Atlantic Ocean. We pretty much have a lot of the same stuff. Most of the species are very similar.
That's how much we love you guys from America, Mark.
The feeling is mutual, at least nowadays, right? American Revolution is so 250 years ago.
Yeah, and we got some guys on Facebook. Pastor Clifford, do you want to just refer to some countries that may have this TDF from Facebook? Has anybody said anything? Pastor Clifford, okay.
There
probably
there is.
Post, but
Japan and Korea and part of China also have TDF. There is an equivalent style in the temperate zones in Australia and one small part of South Africa that have a similar kind of thing going on, but it's not called a temperate deciduous forest because the trees and flowers are so different down there that they've come up with another term, and I'm not at this point remembering what it is. But it's the equivalent because this biome exists in those moderate parts of our global, and I'll show you a map in just a moment. Characteristics:
good.
Migratory birds. Birds that come and go. They go south for the winter and north for the summer. They often arrive into a temperate deciduous forest right after the leaves are fully open. That way they have access to all the insects that are living there, as well as all the protective places to nest. Migratory birds will arrive here in the TDF, and they've actually, by this time in the summertime, they've arrived, they've had their young, and they are off doing summertime. The young have left the nests and are teenage birds now.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
here are some other names that are used when we talk about temperate deciduous forest. They're also sometimes called temperate broadleaf forest or a mixed forest more often these days because of those evergreens I told you about. Also, you will sometimes see the abbreviation in literature online of either TDF or TDBF. Both of those are abbreviations for the temperate deciduous or temperate broadleaf forest. Like I mentioned here, especially since the logging era, pines and hardwoods have been planted in a mixed forest. Here's the map that we were talking about. See those green areas on that big old globe? The green areas are where you have, and you can't see the Japanese part. It's not showing up there. It's too much black. But there's across parts of Eastern Europe and into parts of Russia, China, parts of Eastern Mongolia, and I do not know why the Korean part is not showing up there properly. But anyway, China, Korea, Japan, Eastern Australia. So that's pretty much TDF.
So Mark, we've had someone from Romania say they have TDF from our Facebook audience. And I think the map kind of confirms it.
Yeah. All of Europe used to be part of TDF. It's just most of it has become mixed because of logging. We had an era in our global society where wood was what you built everything out of. Everything from houses to ships to businesses to, everything was made out of wood. Boats, everything was made out of wood. And because hardwood especially, which is what a broadleaf forest is, hardwood, those trees can take 100 to 200 years to grow big enough to use as product to make things. And so if something's only growing one time every 200 years and you're needing a boat like yesterday or a house like yesterday, the trees can't keep up. Pines, however, can grow in 30 to 50 years. Most of them are on a harvesting cycle of either 30, 40, or 50 years. So a third to half the time to create the same amount of lumber. We'll talk later about quality of lumber. That's a different story. But as a result, that's why we have the mixed pine in with the TDF now. We need it for logging. We need wood. Great. Okay, so does that answer that question? And those of you in Romania, enjoy your TDF. You've probably got more of it than I do around my house.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, so any of us from northern climes like maybe Canada or Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, anybody from up in those parts? Because you may have experienced the biome that's usually found north of the temperate deciduous forest. Which one do you think that might be? Yeah, let's answer some questions. Here's our first chat. Okay, and Pastor NJ, this is where we let everybody type in and you read what we've come up with. What do you think makes up a biome? I've told you about the TDF biome. Like, what kind of things do you find in a biome? What words would you use to describe the biome? It's a big word, means there's a lot of stuff involved. What words would you use to describe a biome? Go ahead and enter it in your chat window. Pastor NJ, help us with that.
Okay, so guys, as you've heard, what do you find in a biome? What words would you use to describe a biome? And we've got guys coming back with group of plants and animals, the group of ecosystems, tropical.
That's a good example of one.
And we are waiting for our guys. Any responses from those guys who are on Facebook? Pastor Clifford will keep us in the know. A biome is an area with a certain climate, territory, type of plants, big ecological places, grassland, rainforest. Oh, these guys are really giving it a go. So
you've got it. You've got it.
Yeah.
And so you pretty much said it. Group of plants and animals that together meet the natural regional environment's physical environment. And that includes such things as latitude, elevation, and terrain. Latitude's how far north and south we are of the North Pole and the equator, where we go up and down, north and south. So yeah, good job. You nailed it. Now the one that's north of us is the taiga, or boreal coniferous forest. And there is an NAD honor for taiga as well. That is a very different environment. It is a lot of fun if you have a chance to live in a boreal coniferous forest, a taiga. Oh, there's so much cool stuff that you do up there, and boy, do you get some snow. Okay, let's talk about trees. I enjoy trees. I love getting out and collecting tree leaves and stuff like that. Okay, so let's look at some different types. So here are some hardwood trees. There are other different hardwood trees that are also part of the TDF, but I'm showing you the ones that pretty much show up no matter where you are in the TDF, whether you're in Korea, China, Europe, UK, or the Eastern United States. If you're in the TDF, you probably have these. Okay, there's the maple. There we have a poplar. There we have an oak. Those are, okay, I only had 3 in there. Oh, well, I meant to have a 4th one in there as well, because there's also beech or birch. In the UK, you have a very dominant TDF tree called the lime. It was part of the original TDF, and for whatever reason, it made a really good decorating plant or a landscape plant. So those type you probably have in your garden or in somebody's park near you. A lot of limes in the UK, not so much here. Okay, so why do leaves turn color in the fall? My guess is you know this. I'm not going to play the video because of video streaming problems, but I am going to ask it as a chat. Since many of you have lived in a TDF or in a mixed forest that has trees from the TDF, why do they turn colors in the fall? Hit that chat button again. Pastor NJ, help us out there.
Why do they turn color in the fall? Is that a question? Okay.
Yeah, why do
the
they
leaves change color in the autumn or the fall? So
Yep.
let's get your responses, guys. Mark is giving us a question here. And so let's get your responses. And we will wait for our guys who are on Facebook before we give any feedback. We want to keep in touch with them. And so some of the responses coming in about changes in chlorophyll, less sunlight, temperature, and yeah, less sun is one of those that keeps coming back, or daylight. So it can fall off, say somebody. And
yeah, here's the really funny part. Leaves are not really colored green. Green is like the paint. Like if you were, okay, so those of you ladies that might have wished that you could look like you were 30 instead of 12. You know that makeup stuff that you can put on your eyelashes or on your face or whatever. Maybe grandma or mom uses some of that stuff, and it creates a different look. Their face looks a little bit different than when they're not wearing the makeup. Chlorophyll is kind of like the makeup. Even though it is totally in the leaf, it is basically the green color is masking whatever the real color is of the leaf. The real leaf color is red or yellow or brown or orange. And so in the autumn, as the temperature changes and the light is less, the chlorophyll is not doing the oxygen exchange thing as much because it doesn't have the contributing to conditions to make that easy. And so the chlorophyll basically leaves. It aspirates. It goes faster than it comes. And so the natural color of the leaf shows through. But chlorophyll also has this kind of, unlike the makeup that makes your skin not as healthy, chlorophyll keeps a leaf feeling healthy, almost like hydration, sort of. And so because of the change in temperatures and the loss of chlorophyll, that does leave, like you're saying, to where the leaves drop off and become part of that rich dirt layer every autumn. But the real color of a leaf is your orange, yellow, red, or brown. That's the real color. Green's the
That's very
makeup.
interesting, Mark. Good information there. I had no clue about that. And somebody says lack of vitamins. Well, I should be turning harder than, because we in Scotland, vitamin D is a bit of a problem here.
That's what I've
But
heard.
let's go to Cliff and hear if there's anything on our Facebook audience, just to hear a little more from those guys. Okay, Clifford, maybe I've seen something on Facebook. Hazelnut trees, reference to
Yep.
them.
Yep.
Why do and climate change has been mentioned as one of the reasons for this. Is that true, Mark?
Some of the
What would you say?
some of the diversity in what we have as broadleaf trees has been a climate change or climate science issue, along with pollution. Like here in the United States, we had the American elm, but there was I forget whether it was a mold or a bug, but it pretty much took out millions of trees over the last 20 years. We had a beautiful 200-year-old American elm down by the Smithsonian Natural History Museum in DC. It died 2 years ago. It was one of the last ones alive still on our continent, and it just could not make it because of the changes in temperatures, where the bugs and the molds and whatever were not being destroyed. And so it was taken over by changes in our environment. I don't think we realize how hard it is to be a tree, and how dependent trees are on the weather and the climate and the terrain being just a certain way. God's made them incredibly resilient, and they've been able to handle a lot of changes over the last 400 or 500 years, but some of them are not as resilient as others. And chestnuts in some areas, elms, American elm is basically gone. Walnuts are a broadleaf tree that are parts of deciduous forests, including my backyard. I've got a black walnut tree in my side yard. That's a really nice tree. Cherries sometimes show up. Maybe you've enjoyed the fruit off of those. Nice hardwood that's part of a TDF. Dogwood is also part of the understory. Depending where you are in the TDF, there aren't just those 3 trees. Those are kind of the basic ones that are everywhere. Depending where you are, you also have other ones. But if it has a broad leaf and the leaves fall off in the autumn, it's part of the TDF. It's a deciduous tree.
I've never heard that or thought of that, how difficult it could be to be a tree, how really difficult it is. And you're opening our eyes to think of things from a different perspective, Mark, and that's very good.
I was out in a forest on the West Coast, and it wasn't a temperate deciduous forest, but they were telling us a story about a big tree that all that was left was about a 15-meter tall stump, big tall stump. It used to be a 400-year-old sequoia, which is a giant conifer. Do you know how it died? It wasn't pollution. People loved it so much they kept walking up to it and hugging it. And the combination of the bark that would chip off from them hugging it and the stomping of the dirt that made the dirt so it was super, super compact and couldn't breathe and couldn't let in the water and the nutrients anymore, people loved that tree to death, literally.
Oh,
How's that for a funny story?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so next on, requirement 4. It says read Genesis 1 verses 11 through 13. Discover what Genesis 1 says about when trees were created. Okay, so I'll make it easy. This is a great chart I use when teaching about creation. On day 1, you have light. On day 2, you have water and sky. On day 3, you have lands, plants. Yeah, this is when TDF happens, at least partially. Notice, however, on this triangle, if you go directly across from day 1 where there's light, on day 4, you have lights created to fill the day and the night. Notice how those are related. 1 and 4 are very related. In the same way, number 2 and number 5 are related because it's water and sky is created, then the animals to go in water and sky. Then day 3, the land and the plants. On day 6, the TDF gets finished when the land animals, and of course us, are put into the land. And then, of course, 7 is the crowning act of God's creation, the Sabbath. It's the big...
Okay. Have we kind of lost Mark for... Mark, are you there?
You will have to take over now, Pastor NJ.
Well, I can just look at this lovely picture of the TDF and creation, and I know that Dejan loves this. That's one of his favorite things that he's well known for,
There you go.
rehearsing the days of creation. He knows that very well. Are you back on, Mark?
I am.
Oh, good, good. I was feeling the pressure there. I was
Okay.
about to change color as well.
Oh, so let's talk about some flowering plants. And we already know all the usually found in the spring, so we've already answered that one. Here's some common flowers. Now, by the way, I strongly urge that you download on your device or your parents' device. Maybe your parents haven't given you a device yet. Good job, parents. If they haven't, you don't need one yet. iNaturalist can get you a list of what kinds of plants grow around your park, around your neighborhood, around your region. The ones I've chosen here are ones that are common to both North America and the UK and much of Western Europe. I've chosen the buttercup. Maybe you've seen some of those that look somewhat like that. Or the violet. Yours may be a darker blue or partially white, but usually grow right down there in the grasses. Honeysuckle. In the late summer, if you pick off the flower very carefully, and then where it's connected to the green, all of a sudden becomes a hollow tube, suck that hollow tube and you'll get a little bit of sweet where the pollen is down there. It's delicious. Or how about this one? The anemone comes in several colors: red, blue, purple, pink. Star of Bethlehem, showed you some of those earlier. That's an early spring one. And this one you don't really want to mess with. A stinging nettle. It's got kind of a pokey leaf. Looks a little bit like a mint leaf, but boy, it will sting you. It will leave a little bit of a burn. All of these are in the understory, but these 5 are common to all of us that are in the TDF, regardless of where we are.
And
So
is it just the honeysuckle that we can suck, Mark? Is
the honeysuckle,
is that the only one, or can we venture to the other ones, or is there a problem there?
the advantage of the honeysuckle is it's a tube, so it kind of acts as a natural holding spot, so you can get enough that you can actually taste it.
Okay, so just to let our Pathfinders know, from the ones you've given out, it's only the honeysuckle that we can attempt to enjoy some honey from. Or,
Yes,
well,
and it tastes a little bit like weak honey, like watery honey. It really does. My kids love to go hiking in the late summer and look for the honeysuckle just so they can do that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay, so you've got some common flowers. It may be slightly different for where you are in the TDF. If you don't live in the TDF, choose somewhere near you and make sure you can pretty easily identify the flowers that are part of that near you. Now, how about mammals? That's those 4-legged creatures, right, that bear live young. There's a whole honor on that, isn't there? In Europe, UK, here are some very common ones. There's the fox. There's the wildcat down there in the lower right-hand corner. Wolves, probably don't see those very much anymore, but they're technically part of the TDF. Here in the United States, they only exist in one place in the lower 48. The rest of them are in Alaska. Wolves are largely gone here because they tend to hunt cattle, and so the farmers don't like them. Both you and us have a bison. Yours is a bit smaller. We have the great American bison. Our bison now only hang out in some scattered places on the prairie, which is the biome to the west for us here in the United States. But used to be, right here in Maryland, there used to be bison. There's evidence of those, which is kind of cool. So there's 5 common animals for the Europe and the UK. Some other ones that you've probably seen more likely: deer, red squirrel, dormouse, and a weasel. So showed you some other ones that might be more common. But the first ones I showed you are the ones that are considered markers or indicators that you're in a TDF. These ones here are more adaptable, and they'll go mixed forest. They'll go even into the edges of the boreal coniferous forest and such.
Okay, so if I see any of these animals, I can be more or less confident that I'm in a TDF area, especially, except for the zoo, of course. Mark?
Possums, that's a North American division specialty. Raccoons, I could not find whether you had raccoons or not. I do know that you have a type of rabbit. It's not native to the TDF. It was an import from Asia somewhere, or maybe it was even America, I forget. And we have a squirrel too. Ours is usually gray or black, but similar indicator species for our TDF.
Pastor AJ and Pastor Mark, somebody just mentioned that there's a area called Kent here in the UK, and it says the bison is being introduced there now.
That's sweet.
There's 1 male and 3 females in the forests in Kent, just on the east coast of the United Kingdom.
Oh, if you ever get a chance to see a bison, it is just a cool thing to see.
Thank you, Cliff.
Okay, how about birds? You ready?
Yeah.
Those of you that are in the UK, you know all about that little bird in the upper left-hand corner, don't you? I believe that's your national bird, if I'm understanding what I see on Wikipedia. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
You need to be a little careful now because of the different nations in the UK.
Okay, so which one is this? Educate this poor North American person.
Okay, Clifford, you go for it. You gave the big yes. So you tell us a little more.
The little bird on the left-hand side.
The European robin. Which of the nations? Is that UK or is that simply one of the nations within the UK?
Well, I don't know, but I see them. Actually, I see there's one who visits my garden every day.
That's cool.
Every day, and he's quite friendly, you know. So I live in England.
Okay,
so
maybe it's the English.
I haven't seen anything in Scotland, but you know, there's this little robin that I see every day in my garden.
Oh yes, we have robins in Scotland as well. But in terms of it being a national bird, somebody's just said here the robin is a national bird for England.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There we go. I knew that you all would correct me properly if needed. So the greater spotted eagle is the one directly to the right of the robin. Grand bird does a lot of hunting, part of the TDF, as is the stork in the lower left hand. He's a water bird, but he lives on the margins, on the edges of the TDF. Aquatic warbler is the little bird in the person's hand, and the white-tailed eagle. Here in America, we have white on their head. You have white on their tail. So, you know, some things are more similar than different. See, there's the American bald eagle. See how similar that looks? They're related, but not the same creature. Our robin has orange breast, but a much darker top end. We also have cardinal. A blue heron is similar to your stork. And we have a chickadee, a black-capped chickadee. We all have versions of titmouse and a couple of other species. I didn't show any of the little brown birds because they're so hard to tell one brown bird from another, the little itty-bitty brown birds. So I just kind of bypassed those and chose the more dominant-looking ones to show you. Okay, now here's something, Pathfinders, I need you guys to do. Some of you will do this right now, I know, and you'll just totally miss the next thing I'm going to say. That's why this challenge exists all the way till July 31st. I will send Pastor Dejan the finalists, the code names of those that got first, second, and third place in this Kahoot by July 31st. So you don't have to do it now, but follow this bit.ly link, bit.ly, no www, /38 Kahoot, and this will give you a chance to review all these different animals. I'm not going to do it here because I don't want to give away all the answers and show you how fast I am. So we'll let you do this. This is something for you to do on your own. Fastest time, the faster you answer each question, the more points you get. You can do it more than once. Again, the contest ends on July 31st, and I will send a screenshot of the 3 top winners to Pastor Dejan, and he can let you guys know what happens from there. He can post it somewhere or something.
And Pastor Dan can't just do it himself before he sends out all the information. So guys, please make note of this. I know so many people are into Kahoot, and this is a great option that we have here. So please take down the details. And just as Marcus said, please avoid doing it now straight away so that we can listen to what more interesting stuff he's got to share with us.
And I will post these 2 links in the Zoom chat at the end of my presentation. I don't want to minimize my screen right now, but I can post those later for you in the chat window.
Thank you.
It will also be on the website. It'll be on our website, the UC website afterwards.
Good deal. Thank you all. Okay, so now that you've got the animals figured out, now we need to talk about resources. That basically means, what have we as human beings, how have we benefited? What do we get from the TDF? What do we get? Now, this one, I'm not giving you any of the answers. I'm going to force you to think about this. I want to give you some broad categories, but this is another Kahoot. Let's think about some categories. We've talked a lot about trees. What kinds of resources do you think you would get from trees? Let's use that as a chat question to kind of stir our imagination. Pastor NJ, can you start the chat for me?
Okay. Let's just give it a few minutes, seconds for the guys who are on Facebook. Okay. There you go.
So what are some
oxygen,
categories?
Oxygen.
Ooh, that's a good one.
For carpenting, paper. Clifford, just anytime you're ready, just go on. Furniture.
Nothing from Facebook.
Okay, so we probably needed to wait a little longer. Do bear with us, guys, on Facebook. If we're too fast for you today, we're getting used to this. And bark has also been mentioned. And once we get anything on Facebook.
Okay, any of you ever gone paddling on a wooden boat? Maybe you've gone fishing in a wooden boat? Do any of you live in a wooden house? Yeah?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Were you able to see any thumbs up there, Mark?
I can't see anything because I've full screened my presentation, so I'll depend on you.
Okay. Anybody who lives in a wooden house, or anybody responding with a yes to Mark? Oh, we're only getting no's at the moment.
Do you know what most of you do? Do you know why?
Yes.
Because unless your house is made out of cinder block, which is basically a rock concrete kind of thing, even if you have a brick house or a plastic paneling or a metal paneling, it's all resting on wooden boards. You know how when you walk down your hallway or stand in your dining room or your kitchen, all the walls that are covered with that plaster stuff, that plaster is attached, nailed into wooden 2x4s. You have more.
In fact, Mark, in the UK, in fact, in the UK, a big percentage of homes are built with a wooden frame.
Yep.
And then cladded with bricks.
Yeah. Here in the eastern U.S. as well, the insides are made out of wood and then brick and paneling on the outside.
Yes, wooden frames have been mentioned here as well. Mm-hmm. And so paper and lumber are some of the things that we are getting, corks and support beams.
There you go. All kinds of stuff. There are a lot of resources. Then you add the understory with all of its different vines and berries and flowers, and you add a whole nother level. Any of you enjoy blueberries or blackberries or raspberries, the different berries that you can pick on those pokey bushes. Those are part of the TDF. If any of you do freshwater fishing, the fish in freshwater ponds are often part of the TDF because the forest surrounds that little lake there where you went fishing, part of that same region, just like that great blue heron. Lots of resources that you wouldn't initially think about. We are very dependent on the temperate deciduous forest. If we think historically, and I'm a history teacher as part of the things I like to teach, probably a lot of our battleships and our trade and our merchants, a lot of our history would be very different if we didn't have the vast amount of wood to make those boats that helped so many things change, especially in the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, pretty much up until World War I, when metal became the replacement for wood for all that battle stuff and for all that merchant ship stuff. It was wood until then. We are very dependent on the TDF. Okay, so there's another Kahoot for you to finish. Of course, with every good story, there is a bad story. I was telling you about the American elm earlier. That fell prey to invasion. Let's talk about some invasive species that you might know about. I've included 9 here. Some are animals, some are plants. The EU has actually, I know those of you in the UK, EU is kind of like not a popular word, but they do have a lot of good things online anyway, in spite of Brexit. Yeah, in spite of Brexit, they do have a lot of resources. And here are several invasive species. Usually the invasive species were brought over because somebody on a boat that was traveling to somewhere else to do trade thought that this plant or this animal would be really helpful to fix a problem, or was beautiful and should be planted in their yard, or was cute and should become their pet. And so they brought it home with them. Sometimes the bugs simply slipped onto the boat and lived in the wood or near the wood that the boat was made of, that felt like home to them because it was made out of the same type of wood that they were used to eating or hiding in when they were back in China. Because China, again, has a lot of TDF. So most of the trade for the UK was from either the United States or China. That's where all the colonialism had happened, or much of it during that era. And so that's where the pests came from too. And I know I'm talking in broader categories. Any broad category has exceptions, right? But for example, yellow skunk cabbage came from somewhere else, became rather invasive in the EU and the UK. Tree of heaven, that's the second circle. Broom sedge, the grasses that don't belong here, that are sending out the good grasses and replacing them. Egyptian goose, you've probably seen those, especially if you are in southern UK or in southern Europe and far west Europe. The bullhead catfish, maybe those have taken over the pond near you. A house crow, yeah, those weren't supposed to come from the UK. Probably, my guess is you see those more often. European rabbit, the American bullfrog, and then that turtle there is called a slider. All of these are considered invasive species. There's actually a list of 100 of them that have invaded Europe from other places, usually Asia and the United States. Don't feel too bad here in the United States. Things from Asia and the UK have invaded us too. Again, TDF, back and forth. The invasions have happened, and invasion is a bad thing because the plant that comes over from somewhere else may be more vibrant, more stronger than the local species that already live in the location, and so they take over and chase those other species out, and that's what makes it a bad deal. They're beautiful in their own, but yeah. So here's my challenge to you guys, is find an invasive species in your area that you've experienced in nature, that you've explored, that you know about. You may not have to travel very far, because no matter what biome you live in, there are invasive species that are there, that came from somewhere else. It's part of colonialism. It's part of a global marketplace. It's part of all of us traveling back and forth from one place to the other. Invasive species.
So you were asking, Mark, if any of the guys know any invasive species where they actually live. Do you want to get any responses from that?
I'd love a response. Absolutely.
Okay, so guys, if you have anything on invasive species, maybe something from Japan that you've heard about that you can't even get a mortgage for if the house you're living in has that particular weed, just let us know. Just put it up on Facebook and let us know here on the Zoom platform. So we would love to hear from you.
Somebody on Facebook says the star thistle.
Yes.
Is an invasive species in California that has taken over everywhere.
Yep.
Someone is also, I don't know if it's diamond shrimp, diamond shrimp. You know about that one?
I don't know of that one.
No. Okay. I'm not sure.
And these are species that are great in the original place that they lived. It's when they live where they're not supposed to live that they become a problem. Living where they belong and should be living, no problem. It's when they move to somewhere else that we have a problem.
Okay, I think those are the tree of heaven in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so most of these seem to be in America. Does that mean we are all nice and free here in the UK?
No,
any of these in species?
all those 9 that I showed you were all from the UK. Those are all ones that you all experienced there.
Oh,
someone also mentioned something interesting is that the gray squirrel has taken over from the native red squirrel in the UK, which is now only found in Scotland.
I'm sorry. I'm sure the Americans did that to you. My apologies.
Well, Scotland is where we kind of we can breathe.
There you go.
Yeah, so a lot of gray squirrels. Down south, mainly, you're saying, Cliff, is that it?
Yes, the gray squirrels have taken over here. I'm not sure if that is, yeah. I don't say anything about Scotland now, but yes, maybe.
Yeah, so for red squirrels, you're welcome to Scotland.
There you go. One of these days when I visit the UK, I'll have to make sure I make it to Scotland and hope that Scotland's still part of the UK. I don't know. Maybe I'll just get another visa.
You cannot claim to visit the UK if you do not make it to Scotland.
There you go.
It just doesn't work. Okay, Mark, you have a few more minutes and we want you to do your stuff.
Requirement number 10 is something you're going to have to do on your own because it means that you have to prepare an object lesson with a plant or animal which lives in temperate deciduous forest and share it with somebody. There's all kinds of options, even in COVID-19. You guys know how to do video presentations. At my school, we did not have school all of 4th quarter, but yet the students did devotional talks where they did object lessons for several weeks that we posted on our YouTube channel and all kinds of things. So video is good. It takes a little bit extra time, but just because you're stuck at home doesn't mean you can't do an object lesson. Now let me remind you about an object lesson. It's defined as a type of story which involves a visible, tangible, it means you can touch it, object that you display during your talk. So maybe it's rocks, maybe it's the bark of one of the trees, maybe it's leaves, maybe you tell the story about how chlorophyll leaves the leaves and what happens to them, but then you compare it to a spiritual lesson. You attach it to a spiritual lesson. That's an object lesson. You have to have something in hand as you give this presentation. You tell about it, then you tell about its comparative lesson in the Bible or in a Bible story spiritually. So ask yourself some questions. I'll simply have this as the presentation you can go through in detail when you're actually building it. But we want to make sure that you end your presentation merging the spiritual lesson with the object lesson. Often you will find that you can put that summary statement in one sentence, and that becomes your key thought, your key sentence that your Bible illustration and your object lesson both merge towards. Only has to be 2 or 3 minutes long, not very long at all, but all kinds of options. I'm sure Pastor Dejan would be very interested in you sharing your videos or presentations with him. And I know I'm speaking out of turn a little bit, but NJ, am I pretty consistent there probably?
Yes, yes, you are, certainly.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
will be the path we'll take. So thank you for that.
Okay, so requirement 11, you get to choose one of these three, couple of them. You can visit a place where deciduous trees are on display. It's hard to do right now. There are some virtual collections. Make a collection. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment. Visit a zoo, watch a video. That's boring. Try to skip D. That's really boring compared to the other options. Draw or paint a picture. I'll show you that in just a moment. Give you make a video. That'd be fun. Visit a lumber store. Oh, you can even do that. Did you know that YouTube has like all kinds of wood people that know a lot about wood and can actually demonstrate what different wood types are? Yeah, let's get there. For A, visit a TDF exhibit. There is an equivalent, these two links on this page, askabiologist.asu.edu. You can search the virtual museum for temperate deciduous forest and do a virtual museum visit. This is the best one I found. You can also build a biome interactive experience. It'll take you about 20 minutes unless you get really into it, because there's like 6 different biomes that they let you trade animals and trade plants and whatever. It's pretty interactive. I enjoyed it, but there's that link there. 2 ways that you could do A. B, collect leaves. I want to show you this one. Where did I put that? Right here. I'm going to actually unshare my video unshare my presentation for just a moment so I can actually show you. Stop the share. So that should mean that my camera comes back fully. Does it? Yep. Okay,
Yes,
right here is a great way to actually collect leaves from your yard, your garden, your neighborhood. It's composed of 3 parts, and you can make them bigger. I made a small one. This is about 1 leaf size unless you get the early spring leaves. But you have 2 pieces of, I call it cardboard here in the US. What do you guys call it there?
We'll just call it cardboard as
okay,
well.
So we have the same word. Good.
We want you to feel like one big happy family with those from Botswana, Rwanda, all over the world. We'll just go with cardboard.
Okay, paper towel. You know, the stuff like your mom uses in the kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, this is not toilet tissue. This is not the stuff you use in the washroom. That's too thin. You want something that will soak up the moisture from the green or colored leaves. They're moist, 70% moisture. They need the moisture wicking. So that paper towel, it's really good stuff. And then some rubber bands. I'll show you what they are just in case they're called something different. 3 or 4 of them. They stretch a little bit.
They're called
so
rubber bands as well.
Okay. And so basically what you do is you place the leaves in a single layer on the paper towel. And you do multiple layers of paper towel, 1 underneath, 1 above, and you can stack it. I have stacked 5 or 6 layers of leaves here, all kinds of different layers. And see the stack? I have about 20 little tiny leaves in that stack. There's 6 pieces of paper towel. You have to 1 leaf, not on top of each other, so you lay them out neatly. And then 1 last piece of paper towel on top, like so. And then you put kind of like a sandwich, kind of like a hamburger sandwich or whatever. Then you put the rubber bands on to provide a little bit of pressure and to keep everything together. And then 4 or 5 days later, your leaves will be dry. You can then display them. Maybe you have some contact paper, you know, that sticky clear stuff that you can glue the leaves onto and then turn it into a bookmark. I like to make placemats out of them for the dining table. All kinds, you can DIY, Google, YouTube, what do I do with dried leaves? There's all kinds of cool craft things to do once you have the leaves dried. But something that looks just like that, and that video on the presentation shows you how to do it as well.
Okay, guys, so look at that carefully, because we'll need to make that kind of sandwich using the different dried leaves that Mark is just displayed there for us. Okay, you've got a few more slides, do you, Mark?
I do. A couple of other things. A couple of things you also can do at home. You can draw. There are a lot of drawing demonstrations on YouTube. This one would take you about 15 minutes to draw a European robin. I gave you that bit.ly link. WeDrawAnimals.com has tons of tutorials. It's a whole YouTube channel on different, many of them are TDF. Make sure what you choose to draw is TDF. Make sure it lives in the TDF. Don't draw a pelican that lives on the beach. That's not PDF. That's not TDF. So think about it. Make sure you're drawing something that's part of TDF. But that WeDrawAnimals.com is a great YouTube channel site thing for helping you draw if you choose that option. That's option E. Lumber store visit. I've given you a couple of websites there that you can follow. They're each about 15 minutes long. I'll give you the short version. And again, I'm going to leave this presentation. I don't think I'm coming back. Nope, not coming back to the presentation. I want to show you some types of wood. When I do this presentation in real life, each of the kids can actually touch and feel the wood products because there are ways that trees are different. You notice here, for example, notice the color is way different. The dark one is walnut, the light one is pine, which isn't even part of a TDF, but it has become as part of that mixed Atlantic forest going on. Notice if you look at the end, can you see the end of it, how porous? See those lines from each year's growth, those rings? And how there's more pores, more soda straw holes in the darker layers? That's a pretty porous piece of wood. If I put my fingernail on a piece of pine, I can leave a dent in a piece of pine. Now compare that to like the walnut. Do you see very many pores? Not really, a little bit. You can see the lines. Notice how much closer the lines are together. I mean, compare those two. See the size of the lines? The pine grew a lot faster than the walnut did. It's also a lot harder. When I stick my finger in a piece of walnut, there is no fingernail print left. You also have patterns. See the pattern in the walnut? That's pretty. That would make a nice dresser or bookshelf. The pine is good for when you can't see it, like inside the walls of your house, but that's kind of ugly. See those knots? That's where the limbs come out. Those are kind of ugly and they're not as strong. Pine is used a lot when you build your house as long as you can't see the wood. Cherry is kind of red, and notice it has a nice long, all of its lines are straight. People who do woodworking like cherry because the lines are straight, therefore the cuts and the polishing, the cherry will work. It won't give them weird bumps or cut funny. The locust is really, really heavy. If you could lift this piece of wood and compare it to the cherry or the walnut, the locust is about twice as heavy. And check out the end of that. It looks a little bit like pine, except the lines are closer, but it's much heavier. People like that for that heavy duty. My son, when he does his woodworking, he loves using the locust if he's got his good heavy duty saw going on. It's not good for carving, too hard. And then this final one is an oak. You've probably seen these before. It looks very similar to a pine, about the same color. It's got that kind of pattern thing going on, but it doesn't have any of the poor quality places that would make it a hardwood that might split or might look ugly. This will make a nice, pretty bookshelf as well. It's just a lot lighter. Oaks grow faster, and it's a heavier wood. So hardwoods are preferred by artisans that use wood resources. Hardwoods are preferred. Pine is so much cheaper because it grows 2 to 3 times as fast. Pine is always cheaper. So that's that lumberyard lecture in just a little tiny type of space. So all of you have at least one of those 3 done.
Oh,
only 2 more. Only 2 more.
We really appreciate